The Founding Fathers had a vision that the United States would stand for freedom above all. From the Revolutionary War to the Industrial Revolution to the space race, Americans have upheld that vision by hoisting the flame of liberty aloft, refusing to let it be extinguished amid the changing winds and tumultuous storms of history. Today, this American exceptionalism is being questioned and challenged by those who would hope to rewrite history. But that can only happen if we let it. As the flame of liberty is passed to our generation, it's our job to carry it with the same bravery as the patriots who came before us. So let's take a look back on our legacy to celebrate the explorers, innovators, and great minds who helped make the United States the greatest nation in the history of the world.
And finally, victory. And the nation rejoiced.
In the aftermath of World War II, only two global superpowers remained: the United States of America and the Soviet Union.
A stirring demonstration of Russia's greatest strength, manpower. Now insisting on preparedness, she called up even 15 and 16-year-olds for training.
With the stated goal of spreading their Marxist, Leninist, utopian ideals to every corner of the planet, the Soviet Union quickly found themselves embroiled in a zero-sum competition for global influence with the United States, who felt with good reason that worldwide communism would be disastrous for the health and happiness of mankind.
During the past 7 years, the grave economic, social, and military problems begotten of two world wars have been intensified by the announced and implacable hostility of the powerful communistic dictatorship.
Locked in a stalemate of mutually assured destruction, the two nuclear states didn't engage in direct or open armed conflict. Rather, they began a Cold War, seeking to best one another in every area, from culture to sports to advancements in technology.
Science will never regress. No one can predict what vast new continents of knowledge the future of science will discover.
It was only natural that this competition would soon spread to the stars. At the time, nobody was quite sure what kind of advantages, military or otherwise, the other side might gain by being the first to the moon. But neither side wanted to be the second to find out. So the space race was on.
They're off at 2,000 miles an hour.
This space race epitomized the competition that existed between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States suffered the first defeat when the Soviet Union successfully launched the first Earth-orbiting satellite, Sputnik 1, on October 4th, 1957.
You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite.
It's quite possible that it's transmitting a code, but we don't realize what the code is, of course.
We're running second in this space race, and I, for one, don't believe there's a place for a nation to run second in space.
And before the United States could even act, the Soviets upped the ante on November 3rd, 1957, by launching a dog named Laika into Earth's orbit aboard Sputnik 2.
This is reportedly history's first space travel.
Of course, getting a living organism into Earth's orbit was one thing. Keeping her living was another. Sadly, the Soviets didn't even bother to try, and Laika died within hours of the launch.
America's first attempt to launch a satellite. What happened is already unhappy history. Another setback for the United States.
Just a few months later, on January 31st, 1958, the United States reached their goal of getting a satellite into orbit with the launch of Explorer 1.
At Cape Canaveral, Florida, the Army's Jupiter C rocket is ready for America's second attempt to launch a space satellite. Any one of tens of thousands of things can go wrong with catastrophic results. But all that can be done to assure perfection has been done. The moment is at hand. The countdown reaches 0.
Galvanized with determination following the space race's opening salvos, the United States established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, better known as NASA.
Peace on earth and goodwill toward men everywhere. The familiar phrase now is heard from the far avenues of space as this Christmastide becomes historic and the world grows ever closer. The biggest Christmas present Earthmen have ever found under a tree, and this is how it happens.
With NASA now formed and in an effort to push their advantage, the United States then shattered the world's expectations with the launch of SCORE.
In December, an Atlas ballistic missile guided itself into orbit to become by far the biggest artificial moon. Even more impressive, it carried a tape recording broadcasting to the world the President's message of peace.
Through the marvels of scientific advance, my voice is coming to you from a satellite circling in outer space. My message is a simple one. Through this unique means, I convey to you and to all mankind America's wish for peace on earth and goodwill toward men everywhere.
The Soviets aimed to put an end to this Yuletide merriment by declaring that they intended to surpass the American achievement of communicating via satellite to the people of Earth, and they would do so by going to the moon.
And the thrust into space seems now to be toward the moon.
Technological advances in both countries' space programs were advancing at meteoric pace due to the relentless competition among the two superpowers, and the United States was about to counter the Soviets with a first of its own.
These, ladies and gentlemen, are the nation's Mercury astronauts. Our urgent goal is to subject these gentlemen to every stress, each unusual environment they will experience in that flight.
Despite their string of successes, victory in the space race was far from decided. The Soviet Union's response had to reach historic heights.
The whole world began to speak about the triumph of Soviet science.
I don't consider we're in a race with the Russians to go to the moon. I consider we're in a race with a people that have an entirely different ideology. And the race is a long-term race, and it's growth of man.
The Air Force Command recommends Senior Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin for the first space flight. Allow me to assure the Soviet government, Communist Party, and people that I'll carry out with honor the task entrusted to me, and that I'll be able to overcome all difficulties I may encounter the way a communist should.
On April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space after making a single orbit trip around the Earth aboard Vostok 1. The Soviet Union may have sent a man into orbit, but that man had as little control sitting in Vostok 1 as he did living in the Soviet Union.
This Redstone missile is the center of world attention as Commander Alan B. Shepard Jr. watches some final preparations before the United States attempts to put its first man into space. Hundreds of missiles have been launched from Cape Canaveral, but for the first time there is to be a man aboard.
On May 5, 1961, Alan Shepard became the first to complete a pilot-controlled journey into space aboard Freedom 7. The United States wanted to keep up the momentum and aimed higher than any man or country had before. 3 weeks after Alan Shepard's mission, President John F. Kennedy addressed Congress and challenged NASA to put a man on the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
In 1965 and 66, the Gemini project was the next step to lunar destiny, with the objective to develop space travel techniques to support the Apollo mission by demonstrating mission endurance, methods of performing extravehicular activity without fatigue, and understanding the orbital maneuvers necessary to dock with another spacecraft.
For the first time since the space race began in 1957, Uncle Sam is well in the vanguard. Russia has never maneuvered a spaceship, nor attempted a near rendezvous. Their boosters are more powerful, but Russia also must link two spaceships to accomplish a lunar landing.
In 1966, a naval aviator and test pilot was chosen as the command pilot for the Gemini 8 mission.
The flight of Gemini 8 is under command pilot Neil Armstrong, the first civilian astronaut. And for him and his fellow astronaut, David Scott, the 3-day orbit is the most complex yet planned in the U.S. space program.
The mission required someone with a steady hand to attempt the first ever docking of two vehicles in orbit. This was a critically demanding maneuver that would be necessary for future moon missions.
And right on the nose, the Atlas launch vehicle ignites. And precisely at 11:40 and 59 seconds, the Gemini launch vehicle began lifting off the pad.
But it was easier said than done. Armstrong and his co-pilot David Scott successfully completed the docking, but a malfunctioning thruster caused their capsule and the still connected Gemini Agena target vehicle to dangerously veer off course.
We got serious problems here with the coupling end over end, and we're disengaged from the Agena. They're rolling up and we can't turn anything off.
Armstrong was able to disconnect from the Agena, but as a result, the Gemini 8 capsule entered a nearly uncontrollable spin of almost 1 revolution per second.
Say again?
Violent left roll here at the present time. We can't harm Mars. RCS is armed and we can't fire it. We currently have a roll.
Armstrong and Scott could have almost certainly been doomed. But Armstrong's composure under pressure enabled him to gain control of the capsule and pull Gemini 8 out of the spin, saving their lives and potentially the upcoming Apollo missions to the moon.
I have a question for Neil Armstrong. As I understand it, you've received a raise, courtesy of the President, that amounts to about $5.94 a week after taxes, and I'm wondering what you're going to do with the money.
These 52 experiments, the 1,940 man-hours of the 12 Gemini, and the 6 objectives are now over. But the 12 Gemini have given us experience and confidence to tackle the next goals of manned spaceflight. To land for the first time on the moon, explore it, and return to Earth.
Armstrong and Scott avoided certain peril, but future missions for the US and the Soviets would not come without tragedy and heartbreaking setbacks. In January, 3 American astronauts were on the launch pad for a rehearsal, but tragically perished when a fire spontaneously ignited in their capsule, Apollo 1.
America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test at Cape Kennedy in Florida. There was a flash and that was it. The screen went blank and he said there was no communication from the astronauts. They died silently and apparently swiftly.
The blaze took only seconds to destroy lives and endless hours of work intended to progress the United States and the rest of the world. Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee died as American heroes. Though 1967 was devastating, the United States would not be deterred. The next year, NASA launched Apollo 8, the first human-crewed spacecraft to orbit the moon and return safely to Earth.
2, 1, 0. We have committed. We have liftoff. 7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise. For all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
With this, it seemed inevitable that man would finally walk across the surface of the moon, and it became increasingly clear that the nation to put him there would be the United States.
The stage was set, waiting for the Apollo 11 crew to make the first epical manned landing on the lunar surface, the ultimate goal of the Apollo program.
As the world waited with bated breath for the next steps on our mission to the moon, the question remained, who would be the elite team to take the first step on the lunar surface? Many wanted to be considered, but the team that was selected was the best of the best. It consisted of Buzz Aldrin as lunar module pilot, Michael Collins as command module pilot, and none other than Neil Armstrong as commander.
Apollo 11, this is the launch operations manager. The launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission, flight to land first men on the moon. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 10, 9, ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Yeah, Houston, Apollo 11 entered and gave us a magnificent ride.
Roger, 11, we'll pass that on, and it certainly looks like you're well on your way now. Apollo 11, this is Houston, over.
Roger, go ahead, Houston, Apollo 11.
Altitude now 21,000 feet.
Eagle looking great, your go. 2,000 feet, 2,000 feet, into the ag, 47 degrees. Roger. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Picking up some dust. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
What?
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Wally, say something. I'm speechless.
America's exceptionalism was undeniable as the United States secured its victory in the space race. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped foot off Apollo 11, becoming the first man on the moon.
Yeah, I'm going to step off the limb now.
A moment that will forever be enshrined in history.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was an American achievement, but with 723 million people watching along, the victory was shared and celebrated all across the globe by every nation on the planet. It was a statement to all people and nations that freedom would be the path to enduring innovation, America has proven that anything is possible.
An American Apollo spacecraft and a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft prepare to join in Earth orbit, a time during which differences in language, in technology, in political creed were set aside in favor of the common goal.
NASA was given the charter by the President and by Congress to design and build a reusable space shuttle.
Space Shuttle Orbiter 102, christened Columbia.
The shuttle Discovery may be the most ambitious and eagerly awaited mission in the history of the shuttle program, on board a giant telescope that will redefine our view of the universe.
But the greatest challenge for spacewalkers lies ahead with the assembly of the International Space Station, the biggest spacecraft ever built.
As he went through his pre-launch routine today, Len seemed as unruffled and at ease as he was on that morning 36 years ago.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
What this heralds really is a new era in spaceflight, a new era in space exploration. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to have a base on the moon. We're going to send people to Mars.
Decollage, liftoff from a tropical rainforest to the edge of time itself. James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe.
The directive I'm signing today will refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery. It marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the moon. We will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond.